couple of weeks ago, I posted a video about what I thought was coming with Iran. And what I suggested was that the Trump administration was planning to retaliate, to launch limited retaliatory strikes against Iran in response to the various things that the Iranians have done, including at that point what was current at the time were the drone attacks, really cruise missile attacks on the Saudi oil fields. Now, what I suggested then, which I haven't changed my mind, is that since the Iranians were quite vehement about their intention as a response to American retaliatory strikes, or retaliatory strikes from many of our allies, that they would launch an all-out war in the region, that it would be a responsible thing for the Trump administration to take them at their word, that they just might do that. And the best way was to be prepared for that. And actually the best way to prevent an all-out war would be to be prepared for that, because you wouldn't want the Iranians to think they could get away with murder. So that before we would launch our retaliatory strike, they would have to be prepared for the possibility of an all-out war with Iran, which involved any number of things. And as I pointed out in my previous video, that some of those things were going on. They were holding a carrier in the region. They were moving forces around. They were calling up some merchant ships that they keep in mothballs. They were doing all kinds of things suddenly that made it look to me that maybe they were getting ready to do this. And I clearly was not arguing the Trump administration wants it all out, war with Iran. That's not what they want. It's exactly what they don't want. But what they don't want is to launch a retaliatory strike and then have the Iranians respond with some sort of much larger effort that the Americans can't handle. So that the best way is to be prepared for that. Actually, the best way to prevent that would be to be prepared for it, so the Iranians could see that we were prepared for it. Now, what am I bringing this all up for again? I think if you want to understand what's going on with the Kurds in Syria and between Trump and Erdogan, keep all these things in mind. That's one of the things you don't see in the media today, because they don't really have, most of the people are hacks and they're not experts. And I don't mean that just on the left, the same is true on the right. You don't have the old time people who had spent careers thinking about military affairs and stuff like that you had in the old days. They rotate people around. You do, the city desk, you do deaths, you do foreign policy, you do politics. Nobody wants to get stuck in one little thing. Most people don't. There are a handful of people who do. But I haven't seen anybody connecting what's going on with Iran and what's going on with Turkey. Now, just for the sake of argument, assume you're Donald Trump. I know that's hard to believe. But put yourself in Trump's position and say you've already made up your mind. Your focus is on Iran. And while you're preparing for whatever you're going to do with Iran, along comes this bozo in Turkey, Erdogan, who wants to invade Syria and push the Syrian Kurds out of their areas for a variety of reasons that I won't get into here. What are you going to do? Do you say, okay, well, drop everything with Iran and focus on the Syrian Kurds and Erdogan? I mean, that's one. You're going to do that? No. Trump's not going to do that. He's got so much invested now with Iran, with the sanctions and pulling out of a treaty. He has to keep his eye on the ball. And the ball is Tehran. The ball is not Istanbul. Let me repeat that. Keeping your eye on the ball is Tehran. The ball is not Istanbul. And I think that's what Trump's doing. So what do you do if Erdogan's causing all these problems? You get out of his way, which is basically what we're doing. Because you don't want to have, if you're planning to take on Iran, possibly in an all-out war, if that's what they choose to do, the last thing you want simultaneously is a crisis with Turkey. You just don't want that. So, I mean, a lot of the things Trump's doing in Syria, if you look at them in isolation, for me, I look at them as, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Why is he doing this? This makes no sense. But if you look at it from the bigger perspective, if you look at it from the perspective of a guy who's made the decision, who's already made the decision that at some point he's going to attack Iran, initially with limited strikes, but that this may blow up. The last thing he wants is problems with Turkey. So if you look at it in that context, I would argue that what he's doing in Syria with Erdogan makes perfect sense. It's entirely consistent with what I think is his Iran policy. Now, I could be wrong. His Iran policy may not be his Iran policy. And if that's true, then maybe, this is all just Trump has no idea what he's doing, which is, what Romney and some others say. But if he is indeed focused on Tehran, then the last thing he wants is problems with Erdogan. And, it's not inconceivable that what's happening with Erdogan is part of the deal as he's preparing the ground for going against Tehran. That this is the price he pays, just as, Franklin Roosevelt had to pay a price with Stalin, who killed millions of his own people because he needed Stalin's help when he was going against Hitler. I'm not saying that we've got the Turks are going to help us with Iran, but I'm saying maybe there's an agreement that we'll let them do this and they'll let us do whatever Trump's planning to do. I don't know, and we don't know. I would love to see the conversations going on between Trump and Pence and Erdogan. That would be really interesting, far more interesting than whatever happened in the Ukraine or didn't happen. But again, when you think about what's happening in Syria and all this talk of, Trump doesn't know what he's doing, we're selling out Syria. We are selling out the Syrian Kurds. We're not selling out all the Kurds. In fact, under this agreement, it's going to give the Syrian Kurds time to move in with the Iraqi Kurds, which is probably the last thing that the Iranians and even the Iraqi Shiites want. So in some ways, we're causing more problems for Iran because if all the Kurds get concentrated in one area, they're going to be even a bigger problem for everybody else. If they're out of the way of the Turks, they're going to be in the way of other people. But I think that we have to think that this is a possibility, and we won't know until something happens. But if indeed, as I said, if Donald Trump has made the decision that he's going to launch a retaliatory strike against the Iranians, and he's made the decision that he has to be prepared for some sort of larger Iranian response to those attacks, then the last thing he wants is problems with Erdogan in Syria. And again, here's a key clue. He said they're pulling 1,000 troops out of Syria. Who are these troops? Who are the troops we had in Syria? Regular army, mountain troops? No, these are all special forces. And where are they going? Home? No. Where are they going? Staying in the theater, available for other operations. What other operations? What other operations are on the horizon? Well, if he's made the decision to go against Iran, there you go. These are exactly the troops. We don't have that many special forces troops. We got a fair number. But we got 1,000 stashed in Syria. What better, get them out and use them to, seize Iranian ports or islands in the Persian Gulf, or any number of things you could do that you would need special forces for. So again, this may actually be a clue that he's moving inexorably toward an attack on Iran. Or again, maybe he's not. Maybe he's just totally clueless. But we'll find out in the next few months, I'm sure. But keep this in mind when you start looking at what's going on in Syria with Erdogan and the Kurds. It may be a clue of what he's doing. And as I said, we'll find out sooner or later.